to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Fadi Bousamra,
Yes.
thank you for being on the podcast.
Hello, Kent.
Man, a privilege. Why do you not tell people when you meet him that you're a big deal? We worked out how long together before I knew what you were into? I mean, probably a year, right?
Probably.
A while.
I don't know. I think it's just what I do. I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah.
Well, I think it's pretty great. I think it's pretty great that we have you on my little podcast here.
Well, it's an honor. I've seen some of your casts. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being on. Appreciate it. How long have you been at CrossFit Forte?
Let me make sure I don't get this right. End of 18?
Okay. Well, we might have joined about the same time then.
Yeah.
'Cause that's about the time I
So
joined.
let's see, 18, end of 18, end of 19. Yeah. So I'm
So you
coming
went
up on my third,
Okay.
19, 20.
Yeah. I thought you
No,
were
know
there.
what? End of
when-
17.
Okay.
End of
Yeah, because
17.
when I started attending that gym, it was mid-18. You were already there for sure.
Yeah, I was mid-17,
And,
end of 17.
Okay. And then I dropped out for most of 2019.
Yeah.
Have you tried other types of exercise, or have you just found CrossFit to be one that you particularly enjoy?
Yes to the latter. So I've done half marathons. I have a gym at work, so I've tried to do my own thing at the gym. I've done what's called aerobic tennis.
What is that?
Basically, it's like there's 5, 6, 7, 8 courts, and 3, 4, 5 coaches, and you do a drill. You run to the next court, do a drill, next to a drill. So you have to hit the ball. So there's that tennis aspect of it, but you're also moving around. Running from court to court, doing different shots.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I did Orange Theory as well.
Okay.
And Orange Theory is kind of what got me into looking at CrossFit.
Okay.
I like the class structure.
Yeah, me
because
too.
I was going down to the gym and, doing, and then, I have a job, and I can't sit there and spend an hour planning the workout.
Right. Yeah.
And you get to a point where you're just not getting results. I mean,
Yeah.
It's easy at first when you start because you're starting from nothing.
Yep.
So I looked into some of the using your own body weight, like boot camps and stuff. And then I talked to somebody that was doing CrossFit. I didn't know they did CrossFit, but I knew he was athletic and did a lot of competitions. And he told me that I should look into CrossFit, and I did. And what I discovered through just researching it before I did is I felt like, I've never been like an Olympic weights thing. I've done some machines and dumbbells, but I could see how it could accelerate the advancement because you're loading.
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to, because let's face it, doing pull-ups is hard.
Yes.
And use body weight all you want, but I mean, it's going to take you a while. You know? So I decided to check it out, and by the time we finished the 3-day introductory, thing, I was ready to sign up.
Really?
I knew it was
Did you try other CrossFit gyms before Forte?
No, because I work right up the street, and this one came very highly recommended.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Somebody that I know really well that lives in New York had apparently been going to that gym every time they come see me for business.
Oh, wow.
So when I said CrossFit, he goes, well, dude, there's one right down the street from me. I said, no, I had no idea. And, then I heard it was apparently one of the best ones. So I was like,
interesting.
okay.
So shout out to Evan Beach with CrossFit Forte.
Yeah, he knew Evan. His guy's name is Christian Thorne. He was that turned me on to joining Evan.
Oh, wow. That's very cool. So I've only been this is my third CrossFit gym that I've been a part of.
Okay.
And it's my favorite one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And so I could see but again, it's not like I'm a lifetime CrossFitter. I've not visited that many gyms, so I don't have a lot to compare it to. Of the gyms I've been a part of, this one is my favorite. But so it's interesting to hear you got someone from New York that's saying if you're going to go CrossFit, go CrossFit Forte.
Right. And
the
I've been
location's
to
great
two
too.
other gyms as drop-in since then, and I one in St. Louis and one in L.A.
Yeah.
And I agree, this one is really good. The space we have is phenomenal.
The space is great. The location's great. I mean, it's literally half a mile from here. So, I mean, there's that aspect of it. I like their class times too, but I really like Evan's coaching. Yeah. I'll be honest. I wouldn't want to admit it to his face, but he's a good coach.
There's a lot of good coaches there, though.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of them, the different ones will pick up on different things.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Bob will out of the blue tell you something. It's like, why didn't everybody tell me that? Now this is easier, So you just pick up on something that you're not doing.
Yeah. Well, I think the one advantage. So Evan's pretty decent. Like he's pretty strong and he's pretty decent, and so I think Bob maybe is between our level and Evan. And so Bob, I think some of the movements that Evan might just be great at, Bob's not quite as good at maybe. And so I think that helps too.
He understands what is it you're not doing because you have to
exactly.
get over that,
Yeah, he's not just throwing all kinds of, just crushing it a little bit like Evan can.
And then there's been times where I had to go to the 3:30 or 4:30 class, and those guys get it.
Yeah.
They hit it hard.
Yeah, they do. 11:30. That's the class I like to go to. I don't eat lunch. I don't like to go out to lunch. I think it's a waste of time and stuff. But what is it about the 11:30 class that works good with your schedule?
Well, just because it is lunch, and I go in the office, so I've already been there 3-4 hours.
Okay.
So I love getting that break to get out. And instead of wasting time eating lunch somewhere, I just go do the gym thing, and I usually grab a sandwich right down the street from the gym and go right back to the office.
After? Okay.
Right after,
Okay. So you're back in the office by 1 o'clock? 12:45, 1 o'clock?
A little bit before 1.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it is an hour, and then it's like it does take me an hour and a half or an hour 45 minutes, because you got to get there and then work out, and then I like to shower,
especially
come
going back
here,
to work
just take some time.
Shower, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear all about your story. Okay. What I do know is you moved from Lebanon to America, 12 years old, right?
About, a little bit more,
ish, with no parents.
Right.
That's what I know, and that's about all I know.
Yeah.
Take us back to, even before then, I'd love to know why you moved to America, the whole deal, and take your time talking through, because I'd love to. I'm fascinated by it.
So, although this is my story, it is kind of a story of Lebanon, really. So I was about 9 years old. Well, let's go back a little bit further. Both my parents are Lebanese. I was born in Kuwait because both of them worked in Kuwait.
What were the jobs?
My dad had a small construction company that built pipes for the running water and things like that. And my mom worked as a nurse's aide
in Kuwait.
In Kuwait, and at the Kuwait City Hospital, the only hospital at the time in Kuwait. We're going back to the early '60s now, and so I turned 5 and started school. Parents realized, hell, he's not learning anything, because Kuwait was a pretty new country. They didn't have a lot of good schools and so on and so forth. So they shipped me back to Lebanon to live with my grandparents while I go to school. And I have an older brother that they had just done that to, because he was in school in Lebanon.
How many siblings do you have?
Just one brother.
Just your older brother?
Yeah.
Okay.
So about 2 years went by like this, and then they moved back to Lebanon. So we kind of, at that point, I had a normal household. Even though my brother was too old to be in Hammana, my hometown, he was already in Beirut in school, because he's 11 years older.
Oh, okay.
So he was already at pre-college, they call it there. Yep. So life was normal, for the first time, because we live in the same roof, whatever. My brother was there on the weekends, which he was never there in Kuwait when I was a kid.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, one day in school, I went to a Catholic school, but not all the kids are Catholic, because it's commonplace in Lebanon for kids to send for parents to send their kids to Catholic school, even though they could be not Catholic. They don't have to take the religious class. And so, small town in the mountains, surrounded by other towns, and all of a sudden we're at lunch, we're playing, and odd thing happened. The kids divided themselves into 2 groups. And I was on this side, just by coincidence. That's where I was standing. And they started throwing rocks at each other, the kids, in the playground. I was like, what the heck's going on? And then these kids are yelling at me here, that are standing here, telling me that I'm supposed to be over there. And I'm looking, and I have friends on both sides. Why am I supposed to be over there? So I just kind of crossed the line, went over there. I didn't throw any rocks or anything. And this was kind of an awakening for at the time, about 9 years old, that, hey, we're not all the same. And apparently it was, the country was divided. It was not just strictly on religious lines, but it was pretty much. So just to explain, but you had Christians were over here, but you had a lot of Druze, spelled with a D, over here.
Druze.
Druze. It's a type of a religion, and it's very common in Lebanon. It's only because it. But there were some Christians here too, because they had ideological, political similarities with what they did. So this was kids throwing rocks at each other. And then I remember the school changed after that. And we'd get in the morning and they'd line us up in straight lines and we'd pledge allegiance to the flag kind of thing. It was up to Lebanon, but national anthem and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I started being aware that, hey, that people are carrying guns. There's like my family members are carrying guns. They're going off to do stuff, and just the whole. You wake, think, wow, this is like, you listen, you hear things on the radio, you hear things on the news, but you're 9, you process, certain percentage of it. And then one day, my uncle went to Beirut to join a group of fighters that was defending a high point so that the city of Beirut, where the Christians live, doesn't get shelled. And my brother followed him late because he had left him behind. He didn't want him to go. And my uncle died on that day because of the fighting in a very famous place that there was a lot of fighting, the Holiday Inn it's called, because it was a Holiday Inn hotel. And months later, maybe a little bit longer, the army fell. Essentially, different groups of the army gave their guns to people that had affinity to, or the people would come in and take the guns. So basically, the might of the army became part of the civilians. Different factions were formed.
Oh, wow.
You had Sunni, Shiite, Christian, and each of those factors probably had 2 different factions, Druze as well. I mean, the whole country was in a civil war. The setup was due to what brought this all about was the Palestinian issue. The Arab League had voted to arm the Palestinians in Lebanon to fight Israel. And the Palestinians basically were trying to take over Lebanon to use it as a base. And this kind of people took sides and all kinds of things. What the hell? Well,
and what year is this roughly?
So now we're talking 76.
76. And you're 9 years old
I'm
at this
about
time.
to turn 10. Yeah, I'm 76.
Wow, that's exactly Lincoln's age right now. So that's you, Lincoln. Man, that's amazing.
Yeah. So then one day, we're at home. There's definitely something going to happen. And we're getting phone calls. We're hiding in my grandfather's house, and we get shelled at. And they tell us to leave because they're coming. And so we get out of our house and we go to a neighbor's house, and we get to hide in the basement. And it was a very traumatic night because there was explosions everywhere, and I didn't know what was happening, whatever. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Book Thief.
No.
There's a famous scene in that movie where the young girl is hiding from the bombing of Germany underground. And, imagine like if instead of this wood, it was rock, and you're in the basement, and when the bombs go off, little pieces of dust come out of the ground. You feel like you're going to get buried.
Oh, my goodness.
And they started, like, in the movie, they start singing, telling stories, something like that. But in my world, they started praying and telling, like, we're all Maronite Christians, so they were, and I fell asleep because I think the stress level was so high. That's one of my reactions. Is eventually I fell asleep.
Oh, wow.
We got up the next day, and we went up to our home, which was across the street, and it was blown up.
If you had stayed in your home, you'd be dead.
Yeah, they came and, stole everything and blew it up. And,
were they after something in particular in your home, or your home just happened to get hit?
So, because different, like, political family, our home was not the only one that was hit. It was whoever they suspected of, like they were fighters or they're politically involved or something like that. So my uncle he's the one that was killed in the war, and many of my family members, cousins, and so on. So just walk into your home and at 9 years old, and it's not like the way it was before. They fired some RPGs at the house too before they went in, so I had this like really nasty stench. Like that when you watch movies, you don't realize how smelly war is. But all that stuff,
I would not have thought that either.
All those rockets have different smells, and everything just burns and.
Is it like a gassy type smell, like burning gas, or is it almost more like a stench?
I would say like burning rubber or sulfur, like that.
Wow.
But could be very potent, like overwhelming, like you're going to choke sometimes. These were RPGs.
Interesting. That is not something that comes through in the movies.
Yeah, you see that. Yeah. Even Private Ryan couldn't pull that off.
Yeah, exactly. Surprisingly. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, there are certain smells that stick.
Yeah.
My dad died when I was about 10, and that smell of just him being in the casket and everything, just like it sticks, it's just like you don't forget that.
And images too stick, my mom was devastated because they had took the life savings and furnished this house, built this house, whatever. But the image that stuck in my mind besides the physical destruction, but that kind of gets wiped away. Prior to this event, I had gone on a school trip to the beach in Beirut. And someone, I think my mom, got me a beach ball. And I thought it was great because, I was like one of the kids that didn't quite fit in. I was a little different. I joined the school late because I was in Kuwait. And so the beach ball made me really popular because everybody wanted to play with the beach ball.
Okay.
And walking into the kitchen, which was half demolished, seeing that beach ball imploded with rocks on top of it was like that symbol right there. Somehow the child in me at that point knew that my life had changed forever from that ball. And I don't know how a child would know that, but somehow it was just, I know a ball like that doesn't cost much money, so it couldn't have been that. So
it was a symbol of something greater. Wow.
So we had to go to Beirut after having some run-ins with the people that were in charge there, trying to kidnap people and things like that. Eventually, I was put in a car and sent to Beirut. My dad had already escaped. And
to Beirut?
To Beirut. Beirut at the time then was divided in half. The Green Line, famous Green Line. So you had one area was for the Christian side, one area for the other side. And the other side, was not, you can't say it was like Sunni or Shiite. It was basically the Palestinian and the other side. It was like the country was divided in half. So we stayed there, tried to get a house, tried to find, whatever. Couldn't happen. Everybody in the mountains was being pushed to Beirut. It was just a mass exodus of people, blowing up homes or whatever, So through, a bunch of connections or different things, my dad managed to get a visa to United Arab Emirates, to Dubai. And this is so we had to go to a town called Zahli, stay in Zahli till we got to cross to Syria. We went to cross to Syria. They wouldn't let us cross because while we did have a visa at the airport waiting for us, we couldn't prove that at the border in Lebanon. There's no email back then, you know, and there's no mail service. We're in a war. But somehow they had to get proof that we weren't going to just go to Syria. And eventually that was lined up, and we went to Dubai. My dad started working all over again, starting from scratch. He started like a construction worker, and eventually opened up a company and started all over again. And I had the same experience that I had in Dubai, in Kuwait, where schools weren't that good. I couldn't go to the American schools or English-speaking schools at the time because I didn't know any English. So they sent me to Lebanon to a boarding school, a Catholic boarding school.
Lebanon?
Back to Lebanon, but it was in a safe area of Lebanon where my aunt was a nun at a school that had boarding school as well.
Interesting. How many years after you left Lebanon to begin with?
Within a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because the schools just weren't good. So So this school was a normal school, but it also had people that lived in the school, like a boarding school. The girls that boarded in the school were all girls. So I had to get some special strings, whatever, to be the first boy to go to this all-girl boarding school.
Oh, wow.
And first year actually was, I guess I was only 11 at the time. They let me just stay with the dormers with the girls, but the next year they moved me out to a separate. They felt I was getting too old.
Yeah.
For to be just there with the girls. So, but then they let more boys in. Two more boys came in after that, or one more boy. My cousin, actually.
Oh, wow.
And so, but I made my mom promise that I wouldn't go to boarding school more than 2 years. I hated it.
Really?
I absolutely hated it. I hate that structure. I hate the rules. It was very impersonal. It was there was not a lot of getting out. It was terrible.
A very good education, because I picture it to be, but maybe not.
Yeah. Generally it was, but for me it was a struggle because by then I had been through 3-4 different school systems that taught 3-4 different methods.
Yeah.
So it was very confusing.
How was it being the only guy at an all-girl boarding school? Did you sort of enjoy that, or was it awful?
No, it was great. The only negative part about it was that I had parents and family. Many of them did not. Okay, that's why they were there.
Oh,
so every so often, my uncles would come up from Beirut, and or aunt would come up in Beirut, pick me up, and take me off for the weekend for a break. And I would show up on Sunday, late afternoon on Sunday. I'm upset because I have to go back to boarding school, but they're all sitting there polishing the banisters and cleaning the floors and whatever. And here I come. So
you were out on town for the weekend, and they were working.
there was no winning, so a lot of them have resented me for that.
Yeah, I bet.
But I could tell. I could definitely understand. How they felt, and to be honest with you, it was a miserable experience to come back, because I didn't like boarding school, and even leaving, I was like, this isn't forever. I'm gonna have to come back. But my mother stuck to her word, and 2 years was the limit. So So at the time, my brother, who's like I said, 11 years older, was attending the University of South Carolina as an engineering student, and so he told her, "Why don't you send him here so he can learn English?" And so he wrote a letter saying, "Hey, send my brother. He can learn English, blah, 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 blah." And we took that letter to the U.S. Embassy in Abu Dhabi.
The letter is from who again? Your brother?
My brother. Just an invitation.
Oh, okay.
And we went to the embassy, and I don't know what kind of pre-work my mom had done before, but I know she was on the phone a lot. And we go into this room that was probably a little bit bigger than this space. Not much, a little bit. And I bet there were 50 people in there. Just like packed like sardines, waiting there's a little window, and everybody wants to get a visa to America. And lo and behold, we get called. Just like looking around like, wow. So we'll go back. And this office, really fancy office, the ambassador's office, But it's not the ambassador there. It's like some kind of counselor that works for him or whatever.
And you're at this point, you're in the United Arab Emirates?
Emirates, Abu Dhabi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we drove. We had to drive from Dubai to Abu Dhabi, long drive in the desert.
Okay.
And he's sitting like where you are. I'm sitting over here. My mom's sitting over here. My dad's sitting over here. He's talking to him. I don't know what they're saying because my mom doesn't know English, but she does know some French. Maybe that's what she was. I don't remember. And so, we stand up, and the counselor puts his hand on my back and pats me on the back. Whatever. And I don't know what was going on. So I looked over at my mom and said, what's going on? She said, he's saying, have a good life in America. Like, doesn't he know that he's just giving me a 90-day visa? And she nodded. Of course, she knew then. He knew that I'll be able to stay because we're Lebanese and because of the war situation. And I didn't know. I was just going to go see my brother. I didn't have no idea. And so I didn't quite get the gravity of the situation till, she packs my clothes and we get all. We had to do this twice because the first time I didn't get to go for some reason. I don't understand, but get clothes, new clothes, all well, and then we go to the airport. I don't know if I can do that. So we go to the airport, and my mom tells me goodbye, and she says, "Go," and she says, "Don't look back." Of course, when you're, I guess 13 at the time, if somebody tells you not to look back, you don't look back.
Right.
So I kept looking forward till the last chance. I knew I was going to make a left and be gone because I was at a corner. So I looked back. Sorry. And she had fainted into my dad's arms. I saw her. So it's very traumatic. So, and that was that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Her oldest son's already in America.
Yeah.
Her youngest son just got a 90-day visa, but she knew that he's going to go to America and stay in America. Puts him on a plane and says goodbye. Man.
Yeah.
Wow. Sounds like you have great parents.
Well, the Lebanese not just the Maronite Christians, but certainly I'm well familiar with the Lebanese Maronite Christian story. They came out of Syria and settled into Lebanon to escape persecution, and they settled very mountainous parts of Lebanon so that they would not be easily accessible. But the Ottomans and Muslim rule, whatever, and then there's other sects in Lebanon too that escape from where they are, and so they're very persistent people that in order to survive, you have to be a hard worker. I went to a town not last time, but a couple of times, a few years ago when we went and visited. We went to this town, and it's really steep hills, and they built these terrace walls into the mountains, and then they have flat dirt, right? It's because you can't plant anything in a steep hill like this, right? And the guy was telling us that after from thousands of years ago when they used all the cedar trees in Lebanon to build ships and firewood and whatever, a lot of the soil in these steep areas would erode and be gone. But these people didn't have a choice. They couldn't go live somewhere that was, they had to make the best of what they had. So they would break the rocks of the mountain and build these walls. And they would go down into the valley with a donkey and their kids or whatever, and they would fill up buckets of dirt because all the dirt was in the valley because of the erosion washed. And they would scale up the mountains and fill up these walls that were 4 or 5 feet, 6 feet tall with dirt. And I was like, well, how long does that take? And he goes, well, they worked on it multi-generationally.
Oh, my goodness!
So you started it, but your grandkids got to finish it.
And this is the lineage that your parents are from.
So that's the kind of stuff that they had to do in the mountains. Now they're not specifically from that town.
Sure,
but my town is full of those terraces. I don't know, all of them were built like that and had to bring the dirt. The terraces are all over Lebanon like that because it's a mountainous country and you got to have flat land to plant things.
Yeah.
My family came from a town, not Hamana, where I'm from, but their ancestors. All my family is from Hamana, but their ancestors going back to 1500s came from a different town. But they came to, my understanding is they came to Hamana because they knew how to farm silkworms, and Hamana was a silkworm area. And so they went to do that, and from the farming silkworm and doing it themselves on the side as well. They bought land and settled there, and
I see.
Generations.
Yeah. The multi-generational projects like that is not something we're very familiar with in America. I think that's a lesson that we don't really have these days. It's all about just here and now. Have you seen your parents since?
Yeah. So initially, I would go every year or every other year. But, with time, then they would come every second or third year. My mom more than my dad because he had work. But then they were trying to save up money and go back and rebuild their house. They were sending money. They were trying. My house was destroyed. Mm-hmm. So I remember going back to Dubai for 2-3 summers. And then going to Lebanon only one of those times because it was kind of off limits for a while.
Still dangerous. Is that what you mean? Off limits?
It was. My hometown was. Yeah.
Okay.
And then what's good going if you're just going to be in Beirut? It wasn't the same thing. So, and we really kind of stayed away from our hometown because it was occupied by Syria. And the Syrian army had a way of capturing people and torturing them, and it was pretty. You didn't want to cross the wrong person. It was pretty brutal. And so George W. Bush, during his presidency, there was an incident with the Syrians, and he gave them an ultimatum to leave. And since that time, we've been going back frequently because they left. And we can go back. So last year I went back twice. The year before I went once. So, but my mom passed away in 2010.
Oh, okay. I was going to ask if they were still living.
My dad is doing really well.
Oh, okay. How old is he?
86.
Really? Yeah. Okay, that's about the age I think of Grandpa Ash Lincoln.
Yeah.
Or
he could
my
probably dad. My dad right now could probably do a CrossFit class.
Really?
I think so.
He's fit. Did your mom and dad have a good relationship?
Yeah. It was they eloped.
Okay.
Their life was a struggle. My mom told me one time when she got a little. So I went back one year and we stayed up late because my time is off, and she sleeps during the day, so she was staying up. And she told me that when I was born, the promise that she made to herself that she would raise me, that nobody else would raise me, because my brother was born in Kuwait, and when he turned 5, she had to send him to Lebanon to live with my grandparents because they didn't even have schools then in Kuwait. So that was really a traumatic experience for her. So her having given me up to go to America was just another slap in the face because
sure.
And that's the problem with the war and instability is that families don't really get to make choices for themselves. They're victims of the circumstance. But she definitely believed that both her sons would be better off not there, and I think she was right. I have friends that are my age that I saw some of the war, but not as much as my friends that stayed there. And they have symptoms just like a soldier would. Like you hear soldiers having PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, I guess. Yep. Civilizations get that too. The civilians get that too when they live under bombs and kidnappings and tortures.
Yeah,
and,
believe that.
Yeah. So we take so much for granted,
Oh yeah.
But stability and civility and justice and some way politically being able to resolve differences, whether it's through a court or through change in government or what have you. So it's happening again in Lebanon today. Lebanon is basically overdid it on borrowing the people's money. The government's broke, can't pay it back. So now you have people in droves trying to leave, families being split. The Lebanon is going through a serious time right now.
Right now,
it's probably worse economically than the Civil War. At the time of the Civil War, there was a better economy than there is today.
In the country,
unemployment is believed to be at 40%.
Whoa.
Yeah. So if you go to the bank, if you're fortunate, you had bank savings in dollars, you have to go stand in line, and you get $200 a week.
Whoa.
That's it.
Wow.
Because they don't have it. They were they were taking in all this dollar deposits, crediting interest in dollars. They didn't have a surplus in trade surplus or so positive balance of payments, and so they're going through it right now. It's going to be very tragic for the people of Lebanon. And interestingly enough, for lack of a better word, the warlords of the 1980 Civil War, 1970s and 80s Civil War, they're still there in charge today. They concocted a government that they get a piece of, and so they're still there. So you have a very it's like a clansmanship, us against them, everybody's to his own people,
Okay.
But the bottom line, they can't even take care of their own people. Forget if each could take care of their own people, then the people would be fine.
Right.
But there's not enough to take care of everybody.
Interesting. So they have you have the government, the state government, and then you had these warlords that sort of had almost like minority interests in that government. Is that sort of way of looking at it?
So basically, they are the prime ministers and the ministers of the new government.
The warlords are. Oh wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I mean, they were call them warlords. They were representing their people.
Sure.
During the Civil War, and with a gun.
Yeah.
But after the Civil War was over, the gun becomes economic power.
Yeah.
And that's much more profitable.
Are the people leaving now because of the economic situation or because violence has sprung up again?
So the violence has been pretty much contained. It's been, burning rubber tires in the streets and vandalizing banks. There's been a little bit of thuggery, like people that don't agree with the protesters will infiltrate them and try to strong arm them. That's a huge issue. The country has another problem, which is that the Hezbollah is armed in Lebanon. So you have the military and you have Hezbollah. And so Hezbollah is a political power in Lebanon, representing many Shiites, but you also they have guns, so you have a little lopsided representation, amount of power. So it's going to be. I'm very concerned for Lebanon. Unfortunately, they've dug a hole for themselves, and politically, they're not giving the West much incentive to help them because they don't want to reform, very slow to reform to IMF standards and what the IMF wants. And on the other hand, they're in some ways they're running a very pro-Iran policy because of Hezbollah. So it's going to be very difficult for them.
What was that policy?
Pro-Iran.
Oh, pro-Iran policy.
Yeah, pro-Iran because
Hezbollah
is very much representative of Iran. And this is, this is kind of the Middle Eastern, the problem in the Middle East is you have this struggle going on between the Sunnis and the Shiites, and the Sunnis are predominantly represented by Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. And Iran, even though it's not an Arab country, they speak Farsi, and they have the Shiite religion in common with many Shiites throughout the Middle East, and so there's this power struggle. And quite frankly, I think I'm in finance, so what I see when I look at the Civil War in America, and when I look at the Middle East, I see causes are purely economic. You just have a small pie, and just not enough to divide up, so you have a small group of people that try to corner the pie. But you have a pretty big pie in the Gulf states because they have oil. But they are, that doesn't get invested in the rest of the Middle East. That's to benefit them and invest in other parts of the world. So you have very little capital, productivity, a lack of opportunity. You need some basic inputs in an economy, like a fair system, a law and order, but you also need some capital, and you need capital. Capital plus ideas and starting businesses equals productivity.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're wiped out every 10 years, how big
Right.
an investment are you going to make?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the struggle for most of the Arab countries. It's purely economic. And until they resolve that, they're not going to.
But isn't it's sort of a catch-22 then, isn't it? Because you don't get better economics until you have more certainty or peace, but you're not getting the certainty and peace because the economics aren't good, right? So it's almost like a chicken and egg thing. Like, what's the way forward there?
Yeah, but through some instability, you can make progress with the rule of law, and you can make progress. It's not like there's zero rule of law and zero investment. You have you have something to build on. So it's not like you have to have things all perfectly lined up before the capital comes in. Capital is always willing to take risk, but when you have a system where you don't have electricity, but 18 hours a day, how are you going to open up a computer servers and call centers or whatever it is? I mean, you go around Lebanon, and every building in Beirut has a diesel generator. And you're going on the government grid and to the private grid. There's pollution everywhere from diesel motors burning everywhere for power. That has health consequences for the people.
Oh, absolutely.
Then you got a lack of a fair judiciary. You can basically strong arm people or bribe them because that's the system. And so when somebody comes in and wants to open up, a European company comes in, wants to open up a mall in Beirut, make a massive investment. Well, the Minister of Power wants 5% stake for free because he's going to hook them up to electricity. And the Minister of Water wants a piece. And before you know it, they're saying, adios, this isn't worth it,
Wow.
So it's very much this kind of system that they learned from the Ottoman Empire, And these things, used to happen in the West too. But we have corruption, we call it, and we fight it all the time. It still happens today here.
Yeah.
But it's to the extent. So you don't have to completely root out corruption to have a good economy. You can still have crooked politicians and have, it's just a matter of degree.
Right.
It
Exactly.
matters a lot.
Yeah. I see that for sure. Now, forgive my geography, but does Lebanon border Iran, or if not, how close to it is it?
It's not very close. It's a long way. It's so by American standards, it's just a few states down the road. But that's different. So you have Lebanon's a very small country. Lebanon's a kind of a long country along the Mediterranean. Okay, it looks like almost like a banana, a little fat banana. But from the bottom to the top, the longest 2 points, is like driving from here to Chattanooga, 128 miles. So it's a very small country.
Whoa, from north to south, the country, Lebanon, is like driving from Nashville to Chattanooga.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it inhabits more than 4.5 million people.
Wow.
Yeah, they're big cities. So you got that, Lebanon's on the coast, and then surrounded by Syria. Okay, most of that, except for the southern part, is with Israel. And so then you have so we got Lebanon here, Syria here, Israel here. You got Jordan here. You got Iraq here, and then Iran is beyond that.
Gotcha.
So you got to go through Syria, Iraq, and then Iran.
Okay. Now, when you say that Lebanon has adopted some Iranian policies, or maybe is doing that now, what's the potential end result of that?
Well, the end result is what's happening is you have sanctions on banking, and this administration has just put sanctions on Syria for the similar things. But
U.S. putting those sanctions on, or the UN?
No, the Trump administration put new sanctions on Syria because of what they're doing to their population. So the consequence is that, well, first of all, when you have an armed militia within the country, they get to bring things in and not pay taxes. So you have a revenue shortfall. Then they don't pay for the energy, the electricity, because they can. They have guns. So you got the lack of revenue. And then on top of that, you're trying to curtail the movement of capital for terrorist organizations. So then your banking system is held hostage because of that. So they won't accept reforms that the West wants in order to help Lebanon, because that will curtail their ability to move money.
Sure, that makes sense.
And then on top of that, you got Hezbollah is there because the Shiites were underserved by the government. They didn't build schools for them. They didn't. So it was there and they provide a lot of services. So again, you have failed government. Somebody's going to take up make up the shortfall.
Yeah,
and there's consequences to that.
Sure. Do you have? It sounds like you would still have a lot of family in Lebanon.
Yeah. I have a lot of cousins, dad, uncles. And we consider second and third cousins very close, so we have a lot of cousins.
Okay, you know your second and third cousins?
Yeah, and
really?
When I go, they come visit. And I go visit them.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't know if I know any of my second cousins.
Yeah, see, it's a little different. I live in a town of 10,000 people at the most, peak during the summer months. And everybody knows everybody, and there's like 4 or 5 churches. You go to one of them, most likely your mom went to one, your dad went to the other one, so you got that going too. Okay. So it's very everybody knows everybody, and if you dig long enough, everybody's related somehow.
Sure, yeah, that's great. Now, you were getting emotional talking about leaving your mom and dad, which is obviously understandable. Why is that? Is it because of the traumatic experience, or is it because you loved your mom and your dad very much, and you're 13, you're leaving them? What's behind that emotion?
Well, it's just there's no best option. I mean, what would be the emotion if you left your kids? I mean,
I can't imagine.
For one is that my mom is gone, so she never quite. I don't think my mom spent 5 years of her life with her kids in under her roof, and that's pretty traumatic for a parent. Yeah. And yet to the child too, it's more normal to actually grow up to be so you feel like you're denied a childhood of sorts. You have to grow up really fast. And sometimes you do it very sloppily, but you have no choice. You have to grow up and you have to make something out of your life because you were given a chance and a lot of other people weren't. Yeah. So definitely there's consequence to everybody's life that's involved. Whenever there's war, when there's separation, when there's a loss, you would think like, gosh, this would all resolve and 10 years down the road, we'll be family again, but decades go by. Yeah. You don't get those years back, you don't get your childhood back. In her last 20 years, her health was compromised, so she couldn't come here. The last trip, she came here and stayed with me quite a while. It was very stressful for her. She had surgery right after because she had the underlying condition going on, and that pretty much after the surgery she couldn't leave Lebanon. She wasn't very mobile. She could get around very slowly and so on. So it was, and that's a lot of that was really stress in her life that causes stress is. Stress is a huge killer. Absolutely. What was her name? Siham. Okay. Siham Rashid Bousamra. Okay. And what's your dad's name? Joseph Isaiah Bousamra. Okay. Wonderful. How do you? So I'm sure that experience obviously has sort of informed and affected your entire life leading up to now. How does it affect you now? Like, do you feel a sense of independence? Can't trust anyone? Do you feel like you always have to? I'm just kind of curious how something that I know very few people that have went through something that traumatic,
and it's going to affect you the rest of your life, good, bad, or indifferent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But how do you feel like that affects you now?
So I noticed these things about myself and how I react to different things and whether that's actually good or bad or whatever. But anytime my instincts for most of my life used to be that anytime, anywhere in the world, there was somebody yelling for help before they were being abused, I felt like it's incumbent on us to get involved and help them because they're human beings, and we should settle every wrong. We should make it right because we have the power to do so, and if you have the power to do so, then you have an obligation to do so. That is, for better or for worse, that is embedded in my DNA, But I've also grown older and wiser and realized that you have to pick your battles in life. You can't be like that every time, every place. There's going to be, so that's...
You can't save everybody.
And sometimes trying to save everybody, you end up being the bad guy in the situation. We get United States, I say we, United States, we get we get involved in times with fully good intentions, but whether it's because who we back, doesn't adopt the fairness or treats the people well after we leave or during whatever, then we're blamed for the sins of others, even though we, And now I don't know how responsible we are for that, but I know the responsibility is not zero. I don't know if we can totally be blamed for that because at some point people have to fix their own governments, their own societies, and you just can't do it all for people. But you can definitely keep some bad guys at bay. We certainly did it with Hitler, thank God. So you are hypersensitive to people's dilemmas, and you're also very in tune with the manipulation of governments and propaganda. Because you see it in multiple countries. So you see your own government doing it, you see their government doing it, you see how the Venezuelans do it, you see how the Russians do it. Yeah. I think a lot of us are a little bit naive to that, but now I think maybe waking up to it a little bit with the internet and Facebook, that's what I think is so ironic about, the whole thing about, Russian interference or whatever, but governments have been trying to infiltrate and do things like that for centuries. Facebook is just another medium.
Right.
There's nothing new about that.
Yeah.
And the opposite is true. We've been accusing people of communism for a long time, too.
Yeah, that is true.
People that had nothing to do with communism, So,
do you feel that Americans tend to be very naive or more naive when it comes to some of these things and just sort of think, oh, it's the United States of America. Our government wouldn't manipulate us. Our news wouldn't be jockeying and positioning positioning things. We can sort of trust what we hear and believe what people are saying. Do you think Americans tend to be very naive when it comes to those types of things?
I think we're naive in multiple ways, not just that. The American experience has been very positive. This has been a very successful run that started in, the 1800s? Or 17. Well, but if you want to start back at Columbia
century.
Or independence, whatever you want to do. But... and also our lessons in history. I am losing the volume a little bit. Our lessons. Our lessons in history basically teach us what? Independence from a tyrant. That was the British. Okay, and then we fought to save the world. Bad guy, good guy, and then we had a very important moment in our history, which was the Civil Rights Movement. Which anything that has to do with prejudice, whether it's under Hitler or against Black Americans, is prejudice and is bad, and so that's when we move forward from that. The problem with applying that lesson, it's a good lesson that should be well heeded because prejudice is very much can be controlled and therefore should be from ourselves and in ourselves and in how we learn. But we assume that that's the problem when other people are being discriminated against or seemingly discriminated against. So what I mean by that is like you have a lot of how to put this? You have a lot of anti-American sentiment in America because they ascribe negative things to what we've done in the world. Okay, and sometimes, like, you know, it's shocking to me how much good we've done in the world, and you know, take for example the problem in the Middle East. Okay, is not a Palestinian issue. The problem in the Middle East, or Shiite Sunni, the problem in the Middle East is that the Middle Easterners are not ruling themselves fairly and equitably. They are their own abusers of their society. Funny story, I just read an article in a Lebanese newspaper that translates to English. And it was a girl writing a letter to her grandfather, who's long gone, telling him that he wishes that he had not stood up to the French occupiers of Lebanon and gained independence for Lebanon, because we would be better off today if we were ruled by the French than to be what we have, because we rule ourselves ruthlessly with a and this is a pattern. I mean, look at how Saddam Hussein ruled his people. Look at how Assad rules his Syria. Look at there is no equality. We assume that, so therefore we're being prejudiced against Muslims because of X, Y, Z. But reality, this isn't Muslim Christian. Whatever country you are in the Middle East, the people are oppressing themselves. They're not giving each other freedom. They're not giving each other. It's like, okay, you ruled me for 100 years. Now it's my turn. There is no sharing of power or equality or whatever. And by the way, when there is, we're going to just use it to enrich ourselves at your expense.
Right.
So just applying the American civil rights experience to the Middle East does not even put you in the right ballpark.
I see.
And that to me, it's a we can't look at it as a prejudice thing, a racist thing, or whatever. It is a civilization that has not figured out how to function within the rule of law. Okay, and they are victimizing each other.
Yes,
the people are being victimized in Syria, in Iran, in you name it, in any Egypt. We assume that if we put equality in place and people treat people equally or whatever. But in fact, when we took down the Saddam regime, all the Shiites of Iraq wanted to do was keep the Sunnis out of the government, because now it's their turn to rule.
Yeah.
And here we go again.
Okay. So it's almost like just it's different day, same story. We have a different ruler, but we have the same problems.
Yeah. And then there's the issue of tolerance. And there is no tolerance for other religions in most of the countries. There's just the Jews used to be all over the Middle East. I think like there's no more Jews left in the Middle East other than Israel.
Really?
You can go on and on and on about different ethnicities and different ethnic groups. There is no fundamental belief in that. You have to have tolerance, and when people say that historically, I'm not talking about modern day, but historically, when what they meant by tolerating other religions was that you surrendered your rights and then you could be tolerated. But as a precondition was you had to surrender your rights.
Right.
That's not
Which is
really
not
what
tolerance.
we mean when we say tolerance.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So going back to your point, I think you were making a point there that I don't want to pass over too quickly, but is it safe to say you're saying the civil rights issues that we have in America is that we've had in the past and still have is not the same as the unrest in, say, Lebanon? It's apples and oranges.
I wish it was the same because it would be so much easier.
Yeah.
And you know, in Lebanon, for example, when I go talk to my cousins and you know, especially the new generation, there is not really like hostility towards different sects or different religions. It's Lebanon is multicultural, multi-religion, a little bit unique. Right, because you have a lot of the other countries tend to be, you know, one religion, one.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if you go to the Gulf states, they're all Sunnis.
Oh, okay.
You know, there's Egypt is mostly Shiite Muslim. You know, so you have that. So and that doesn't happen by accident. I mean, there's been ethnic cleansing going on in those countries for many years. I mean, Coptic Christians were the biggest Christian culture in the Middle East. They're all in Egypt. They're a minority, and they're not even allowed. You know, many things they cannot do. So this is by design. You know, this is, but I don't think Lebanon is much more progressive in the culture and so on. Has always had that multiculturalism. It only took like a really turn for the worse during the Civil War.
I see.
And since then, the people kind of recognize the problems with that, and there's definitely, you know, however, the systems of government have organized themselves around those prejudices. You know, just like we have Republican, Democrat, they have this office is held, sorry for banging on the table, this office is held by a Shiite, this office is held by a Sunni, this is your piece of the pie, this is my piece of this is my budget, you don't mess with my budget, you don't audit my budget. So it has been very ingrained into the system of government. I get to hire people in my area. There's no audits. There's no.
Yes.
So so while the people are over here, the government is over here. And if you listen to what the protesters are saying, they want to get rid of secularism. They don't want things based on secularism because you know. But through secularism, they're able to divide the pie, and everybody feeds their group, and the very select few enrich themselves on the top, and. You know, there's about 4 million or almost 4.5 million Lebanese in Lebanon. There's over 6 million Lebanese outside of Lebanon. So basically what we do is you just export one generation after another. And it's really a great business model for Lebanon because they leave and send money for their parents to put in the bank and eat and whatever. And that money goes in the bank, the government borrows it and divides it up among projects for all the rich people.
Whoa!
And it just keeps going. And you have a lot of governments when you look around the world. If you understand the economic situation, the economic formula they have put together, you get at exactly what's wrong with the country. It's usually a few people enriching themselves at the expense of others. Lack of investment in people capital, so therefore you don't have. You lack basically in Lebanon there's very, very well educated people in a lot of places, but they've been educated in private schools by their parents. You know, the government is not investing in its people, but it's cronyism. It's you know, and you know, it's not unique to Lebanon, but it's a matter of degree. And when it gets so bad in a country, those are the consequences.
Yes. So what are the people? Where's the hope for the people? Is there hope that if enough people protest this, band together, say enough with the corruption and all of this, that it can trend in a better direction? Or is that just going to be a difficult, without some sort of a insurgence or an uprising or taking over?
So according to the president of Lebanon, Michel Aoun, the best hope for the people is just to leave the country because that's what's been happening. Just send money back and we'll be fine.
Like they actually talk about that openly.
Said that.
Oh, wow.
So the you know, this is like mother's kind of angry, like, why do we have to give up one generation after generation? And it's like, hey, that's how it is.
Wow.
You know? So sorry, I lost your question because the first part of it triggered me. But
yeah. Well, how does, you mentioned burning tires in the streets?
Yeah.
How does the frustration manifest itself
Anger,
among the common people?
Yeah, there's a lot of anger, a lot of loss of hope. Just people. It's economically it's a no-win situation. But you have people driving Ferraris in Beirut and Lamborghinis, and the nightlife is like crazy or whatever. Especially before this collapse of the lira, the currency that collapsed. But there's people that did very well on this. Imagine, like, if you were connected with government projects and you made $1 million out of government projects and you put that money in the bank, well, the government was paying you $1 million, US dollars. The government was paying you 7 to 10% interest on your dollars. So imagine if you had that in there for a decade. You're doing really well. You're doubling your money every 7 years. So there's money there, and then it's just being routed. And that's really what governments and political systems are ways to manage that wealth.
Yeah, yeah. So knowing what you know about everything going on in Lebanon and some of the other countries experiencing some pretty significant unrest, knowing your history and your background and everything, your experiences, what are your thoughts on what's going on in America right now?
So listen, this is a complicated subject, but let me just say, like, cameras have really shown us some truths that we suspected. You never know. We give the police, So there are some issues that cameras have definitely brought out. Now, you can argue that in some situations, you are by law obligated to follow lawful instructions from a police officer. That's been tested with the Supreme Court, and so. So this, at the most simple level, the most obvious thing is that societies change, and sometimes they don't want to be policed the same way, and so policing will change as a result of what we're experiencing. However, I think that's really the tip of the iceberg. When somebody protests in the street and says it's due to racism or systemic racism, they're protesting something. Their experience is not unreal, okay? They're not just like dreaming this up. But they may not actually know whether it's systemic racism or economic problem or where the problem is. It's just manifesting itself on blaming the cops. But I think the cops are getting a disproportionate blame for it because of some things that are easy to point out. Most people can't point out to what is systemically wrong about the way we structure our rules that disadvantages certain people. But they sure as hell can watch a camera and see racism and see people being pulled for no reason that then turns into, let's bring the dogs out, let's search the car, let's, I don't want to, some different people will point to different data points, okay? But there is a serious problem. Definitely in cities like Cincinnati and other cities that have done some research on this, they have found that if you're pulled over and for the same suspicion, whatever the initial suspicion being pulled over, you're more likely to be searched, like 70% versus 40%. 40% of people are pulled over, if I'm remembering the statistics right, in Cincinnati that are white are searched. 70% of people that are pulled over that are black are searched.
Yes.
Okay? And then how many going through it? Now, the shootings, I'm not sure that you can prove numerically that there's a bias there. Apparently the cops are shooting everybody. But then again, we have cameras now. Cameras are highlighting a lot of things. But we got to act rationally when we see these outrageous things. When what happened to George Floyd, it's tragic, but I think we were all kind of in agreement that something's going to be done about this. You know, I mean, the federal government was on it as a civil rights case. The states were on it. So what we're going to do, torch our society? So this is the difference between a civilized society. As long as you have means to resolve something peacefully in the court of law, you are much more powerful. And I think there unfortunately. It hurts their cause, but we have to we have to give them we have to not look away just because they used violence. We need to stay and tuned in and see what are the issues, how can this be resolved. But Martin Luther King knew that he could get this country to move in the right direction non-violently. Non-violence is very powerful. And what are I can understand being a black man in this country and being angry. I would be too. What are all these angry white people for? What are they angry about? What's up with that? You want to support your brother? Go support him, stand behind him, but don't take over their cause and make it into Antifa. These people have stolen a legitimate protest and people that legitimately have anger and feel like they've been wrong. Now, what the solution is may not be what they think it should be. That's not their job, But
it's not their job to get angry and cause unrest. You mean?
No, it's not their job to make sure they tell you exactly why they're angry and how to solve their problem. They call it systemic racism. It may be something else that we need to do, right?
Okay.
So that's where I think that this is really where it all comes down is this is really lack of opportunity. We have, when there are consequences to globalism, there are consequences to immigration. Okay, I'm an immigrant. Okay, I think immigrants are an asset to this country. All of us are immigrants in one way or another. So I'm by no means anti-immigration, but when you bring in people that can take jobs at a lower pay, somebody suffers, and it's not me. Okay. So we got to be smart enough to put a construct together where we can have immigrants and we can also take care of the people that are here. Yes. Because you might be an immigrant today in this country, but tomorrow you won't be an immigrant. Somebody else will be an immigrant. So we have to structure the pie. And unfortunately, through globalization, we've left a lot of people behind. Okay, and it can't be solved with minimum wage. Minimum wage will never be high enough to give people hope in life. Okay, we need jobs that come with much higher benefits and much higher pay, and that comes from what? From having the jobs here.
Yeah, and also minimum wage doesn't guarantee you get a job. You know,
right. They could lock a lot of people out. You could self-destruct basically.
Yes.
So what my point in saying that is that the victim feels the oppression, feels the wrong, cries out for help. Okay. Sometimes you need a doctor to look at the symptoms and diagnose the disease. The patient doesn't always know what the disease is.
So are you saying that, in your opinion, we have maybe less of a systemic racism problem in this country and more of an economic and opportunity problem? Or you say we have, you say we have an issue on both fronts?
Yeah. So the anger over the videos, okay, is because, one, we have not been desensitized to them. Good thing.
Right. Yeah.
Eventually we will. We watch enough horror movies, you'll get desensitized, right? But so we got these videos now coming at us, right? So it's highlighting that, hey, this we're angry about this. But why are you so angry about it? Not just because of the police brutality. Obviously you're getting angry, but there's underlying, you're saying systemic racism. You're not just saying it's the cops. So I think the cops are getting the blunt of societal problems.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And that doesn't in any way excuse the bad behavior or whatever. I think there's a lot of practices that we have in this country that, quite frankly, the courts have given too many liberties to the way police can conduct stops. Okay. But why have they done that? The irony here is that cops get in trouble and everybody is anti-police, including the mayor and all the council members. But if you really go back and look, who gave them that power? Who gave them the priorities to control crime in low neighborhoods? Who told them that it's okay to make a stop because you're looking for other behavior? They can't do that on their own.
It was all politicians.
We have hired sheriffs year in and year out. From the mayor hires the sheriff, or the council wants to control crime. You bring people in to control crime by doing what? By doing these kinds of behaviors. So it's really kind of laughable that those same politicians that have been in there for 30, 40 years now all of a sudden point finger as the cops and say how bad they are. They have been part of that system.
Yeah. They made the system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a very punitive culture. People get up. If I get in trouble, okay, I'm going to be patient with camera or no camera because I'll get my day in court, But if I'm out if I'm poor, don't have 2 cents in my bank account, and I'm getting in trouble, and if this guy arrests me, I'm out on parole, and the whole process starts over, and I lose my job, lose everything else. So this is how we're treating with our fellow citizens.
Yes.
Right? So of course you're going to run from the cops.
Yes.
Okay? They're not running from the cops because, they know. Listen, man, even a person that's been drinking knows that guy has a gun.
Yeah.
And to take his taser and run, it's because you don't want to face the consequences because they're so severe.
Yes. Well, and doesn't that speak to then some of the systemic or institutional problem that we have here that really starts from the top?
This is systemic. Don't blame it on systems. This is exactly a system you wanted. Mothers Against Drunk Driving wanted extreme penalties for drunk driving because it's bad and people die. So we put it in place. That's not systemic. That's intentional by design.
Yeah.
It's not accidental. When you tell a police officer that we want low crime, so go out there and make these stops and see what you can come up with, and you have people that are assigned to a drug force and violent drug whatever are doing speed stops. Why are you stopping a guy for speeding when you're on a drug for a task force? Well, because you're using it as an excuse for something else.
Yes.
But listen, this is minute compared to what the people are screaming about. The cops are just following what somebody else told them to do.
Right.
Okay. These are the systems we have in place, and the thing is that what we put them in a position where they may have to protect themselves with a gun. You can't wait till somebody takes the first punch or the first shot before you respond back. So you got to have some way. You got to guarantee that cop that if you respond, I got your back. So he responds. So we got to be cognizant of that. Now, how they behave, we can control that, right? We can totally control that. But that's not really what they mean by systemic racism. Systemic racism is, why did that guy not even have the economic opportunity where we had to turn to selling small bags of cocaine or small bags of whatever, so just to get money in his pocket?
Yes.
When people don't have hope, less people will make it out of that system and will revert back to that kind of behavior.
Yes.
That's really what we're talking about here.
Yes, I totally agree. So do you believe then, in your assessment, that we do need to change some of those things? We got to change things from the top down. Do you think that we do need to make some of these changes at an institutional or top-down level? Or are you saying, no, it's all fine, we can do whatever we want, we just need to behave according to the system that's given to us then?
No, we need to, there's, besides these rules that we're talking about, we need jobs to come to these communities.
Yeah.
Okay? We incentivize corporations many different ways. We sure as heck could incentivize people to move the jobs instead of all of them going to South Korea or from China or somewhere else, to give them incentive, give them money for training, give them let's open up where those people are.
Yes. Well, I totally agree with that. And that shift happened in the 70s and 80s. You saw a lot of jobs moving out of urban areas, out into the country. Yeah. And then you have these people that are in these urban areas that couldn't afford to go with the jobs. Now they don't have a job, and now they are getting, and then about that time, the drug war gets fired up. And it's just there's so many things happening at once. And you lump in education in there too. I mean, I just think, there is this feeling sometimes that I have experienced from those that I've rubbed shoulders with. It was just sort of like, anyone can pick themselves up by the bootstraps if they just decide and go for it. Well, dude, that's tough, man. I mean, look, I'm barely making it, and I had a good upbringing and a good education, these types of things. If you're from some of these areas where you got a lot stacked against you.
Yeah, they don't know what they're talking about when they say that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. So listen, we can't pick everybody up. People do have to act responsibly, whatever, but you got to give them a chance. You got to give them the opportunity. It's clear when you look at the job environment in those areas that it's not them that's the problem. I mean, it's the jobs aren't there. So the jobs you're talking about went from the inner cities to the suburbs and then to China.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's be honest about it. And then we create these so-called welding jobs and all these jobs, and they get paid $9 an hour. You're not going to establish a family and be a dad that stays with the kids and so on and so forth. Don't blame him for running when he has nothing to offer them when he's there.
Right.
So look. Personal responsibility is paramount. You can't make people take advantage of an opportunity in front of them, but you surely can recognize a problem. And the reason I say it's not systemic racism, because poor white people suffer those circumstances just as much. So it's not systemic racism; it's something else. It's systemic lack of opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Now, what would you say to those that would say the issue actually is between the elites or the wealthy and the poor, and the elites or the wealthy or those in power are trying to make it about race so that your poor white people are pitted against your poor black people, and you can let them sort of focus on each other and have their battle, when all along the elites or the people in power, the wealthy people, are just trying to divert the tension away from themselves? Do you think there's something to that?
So, I think I can buy some of that under our political system, where you have a Republican, Democrat. Okay, maybe I'm not as cynical as you are, but you have two-party system, and each one is trying to carve out a piece for themselves. So you do use clansmanship and race as a way for identity. So identify with me, I'm for you. They're anti this, so therefore we're that. So. But too, you got to blame the people to some of this. I mean, we are in a representative democracy here, right? So there's some misconceptions about how economics works on both sides. If you talk to somebody, I'm generalizing here, stereotypes, but an extreme stereotypes, just to illustrate a point. If you talk to somebody that's on the left, way on the left, their solution to all of this is take the money from the rich, and you'll solve this problem.
Yep.
Okay. If there is, so their theory on this is that if somehow there wasn't rich people, redistribution of wealth, you would resolve this. Well, if that's the case, then countries like Venezuela and Iran and places like that would be doing well, because they don't have a bunch of wealthy people. So that's flawed, and the reason it's flawed is because investment capital is one of the main ingredients needed to add to human capital, to have productivity, to have a standard of living, to have a good life. So the wealth that Bill Gates has accumulated is an asset to this country, not a liability.
Yes.
Okay? But the way that view looks at it is like a zero-sum game. It's like there's only a finite amount of money, and if he has it and I don't, that means the only. But money is not finite in our system. Money is infinite in our system. As it's invested and it gets returns, it has a multiplier effect. So the reason we have a higher standard of living, one of the ingredients for that is having the capital to be invested. If all the capital was in the hands of poor people so they could just pay their bills, there wouldn't be enough capital to invest to so there's the left side, how really kind of misguided that view is. Okay, then you go the same thing on the opposite extreme, right? That we can't have minimum wage, higher minimum wage, which is been because why should they make more for doing a measly job that needs no training when I only make $20 an hour. Which I've seen this article one time where the journalist, I think Wall Street Journal, if I'm not mistaken, maybe New York Times, basically talked to this woman that felt like it was unfair that the waitress would under this new system that's being proposed would get more money, because that's a no-skill job, and she's worked her butt off to get to a operate heavy equipment in a very male-dominated field, so she could make that kind of money. What she doesn't realize is, again, it's not a zero-sum game. If the minimum wage is higher, so wouldn't the job that requires so much training and so on would pay even more. So it's like she's saying somebody's getting a free lunch where I had to work hard for what I got.
Right.
They're not getting it out of your pocket. And that's so we have misconceptions when you have people coming in to interpret political events with really very misguided notions of how economies work. They often arrive at the wrong conclusion of what the actual. So it's not their job to come up with the correct recipe for resolving it. That's the job of us, in our society, our government, to diagnose the patient and prescribe a medical plan to solve the problem. Okay? That's the job of our government. And the government, instead, going back to what you were alluding, instead, since these things are not easy to resolve, would just as well just go back to the old tricks of it's Republican against Democrats, they're good,
Absolutely.
we're bad, you're evil, good. And so in that regard, I agree with you 100%. That that's the design part. Yeah, absolutely. That's what politics is. It's Klansmanship.
Yeah.
You know, give me your allegiance, and I'll that's.
Yep. Yeah, when the focus is on re-election more than the benefit of the American people, that I'm going back to that the story you had earlier about how they would work on this mountain with those terraces over multiple generations. What we have here now in America is not going to be an easy fix. This is not a 4-year turnaround. This is not a 2-term turnaround. You know, we've got some things to fix here, but it's going to take some time. And when we're all just concerned about the next election and our own political party more than the benefit of the American people, that's a tough thing to spin out of.
Yeah. And you know the old solutions that the government likes to pass a law and they think they abolished everything, right? You can't change somebody's heart with a law. Right.
Yep.
So the same way with economic opportunity, you're not going to be able to create a welfare system that solves this, because by definition, it takes away the hope and the motivation to do better. Matter of fact, you somewhat trap people in it, because the better the welfare system is, the more you have to make in order to escape it. You know, if I am making X amount of dollars for doing nothing, okay, in order for me to move my life forward, I got to make X so I can lose that X, and then I got to do more.
Yes.
Right. So it, you know, and now you have more and more generations that are surviving on the basic benefit. But what you need to reach escape velocity. You got to make enough money to get out of this thing, right? But you can't do that without good jobs. You're not going to do it with benefits.
Yeah.
Okay. When people might think, oh, healthcare will solve, but healthcare will solve nothing. A job solves everything. A good paying job with health benefits solves everything. Gives people hope, gives people opportunity, gives people the discipline to get up and go to work every day, so that their kid grows up seeing dad go to work every day. So then they go to work every day, and then they have a stable home environment. So then they go to school and they actually learn something, because they don't have to worry about food on the table, and they have to worry about why there's so much drugs in their house, whatever. So this is how you create family stability that then leads to education, that leads to one generation doing better than the other.
Interesting. Okay, so if we have a really great healthcare system and welfare system where a lot of people don't need to work and they're taken care of with their income and their health care, you're saying we still have an issue, because what are we doing? We are being provided for. The government's giving us this free money. We're being provided for. We're going to take care of our families, but we're going to be sitting at home on our butts all day, getting bored. We're not going to be aspiring to get greater things. We're not going to be growing and learning and developing, learning new skills. We don't have that hope. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Give someone the money, but you haven't fixed the problem. They need a purpose. They need that
Man,
work.
Modeling is part of life. I mean, that's how one pet learns how to behave from the older pet, and the human learns to behave just like from the other. So, are you aware of this book, 5,000 Hours or something like that? Malcolm
Gladwell, 10,000 Hours.
Okay,
yeah.
So I'm not referring to that book. I'm referring to some other articles that I've read that he's written, and one of them kind of struck home because some people will use my experience coming to this country and say, "See, you came here with nothing, and look at you, right? So why can't they do it?" Okay. Well, that's actually, according to him, that's actually a misunderstanding. Okay. First of all, people like me that come here, not all of them succeed. It's not like some kind of a formula, right? However, there is a general propensity for people that come from outside the United States to do well. Well, why is that? Well, first of all, you got positive selection. You got people that are motivated that sent you here or you came here. That's one. Second, you have a chip on your shoulder to prove yourself. Okay. Third, you come from an environment where nobody had welfare. You worked your ass off, right? So in his argument, he makes me not special at all. He says I was set up to succeed.
Okay.
Because I came here, I didn't know the language, I had a chip on my shoulder. My mom and dad were hardworking. They sent it to me. I had to not disappoint. I had ego. I have all the formula that he describes to become successful. That's not what's going on when a kid is born and he doesn't know whether he has a meal or not, and the mom doesn't talk to him because they weren't talked to, and she's too busy making $0 an hour, so you have no good daycare, and family is not around, and if whoever is around is not a good influence. Okay, that's two different things.
Yes.
Okay, of course somebody from the other environment would succeed. That's not saying anything about that kid that was set up to fail because he was born surrounded by people that had lost hope because life had beat him down because their government created a system that doesn't work.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. Yeah, that's well said. So how do we get jobs then for these people? Do we bring jobs back from overseas but then beyond that, we've got to get jobs more in the urban areas, right? But a lot of times, cities is not the place where you want to have your company because you've got city tax on top of every other tax. Well,
look at Nashville. We exempt companies left and right that come here. So I don't think it's that at all. I think that first you got to calculate the cost of the problem because when you calculate the cost, the ongoing cost of having millions of people incarcerated, and the cost to the system, and the violence that the violent crime is a product of that environment too, and that takes its toll on innocent people as well. You have to calculate. You have to somehow monetize or get your hands around the cost, because then the cost of the solution will pale in comparison. But when you're ignorant about the cost, any solution is going to be too expensive.
Yes. Well, and now aren't we starting to touch on some issues with corruption? Because, yes, while the prison system and all of those things is very expensive and there is a cost to it, it also benefits some people. And those people have some power. And so those select people aren't going to want this to change.
Yeah. Well, it benefits a lot of people, not just select people. I mean, listen, the reason back in the 80s, the streets in America in many cities were very very unsafe, okay? I've heard stories about Nashville in the 70s and 80s, okay? And so the solution that we adopted was to incarcerate people, to clean up everything. And you know what? Cities have come back. A lot of cities have. So incarcerating people works for some people, right? You and me have a safer city, okay? But we now have a problem of how do we not incarcerate the people to begin with, okay? It's possible that that it's not that we did a horrible thing. It's just maybe we can do it better.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So why do we have to always vilify the past because we did clean up cities. New York was a horrible place.
Yeah.
You know, Bryant Park's my favorite park in New York City. It used to be called Needle Park. Okay? So maybe some of these practices did have a payoff. Okay? But society changes, and it sees the result of that and says, that's a little harsh. Why can't we do it a little differently?
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective.
Why can't we just move forward another step, another experiment? We've done this many times.
Yeah. What I like about that perspective is it is more practical. In other words, who cares whether we should have done what we did in the 80s or not? It's 2020. It's done.
Yeah. Because what happens when you approach it that way, then everybody that did it is your enemy. Everybody that's for law and order is now all of a sudden your enemy. No, I'm for law and order too. I don't want enemies. I want people in law and order to back up my plan.
Yeah.
But that's because the people in power, they want us to act this way. They want you to be one side and I'm on the other. Okay?
For votes? For
votes it's
primarily?
clansmanship. That's what politics is. You're my guy. You're going to vote for me no matter what.
Yeah.
But there is a rebellion going on within the parties. I think that look, we had no matter how you feel about him, we had a very outside candidate get nominated by the Republican Party, and shockingly won the election. But you know what? Americans aren't stupid. He was the only one that was not saying what they've already heard before.
Right.
Okay. So now we can vilify him. By all the crazy antics that he does, and certainly not the most politically correct person in the world, but he does have a great weakness that we could really take advantage of. He likes to be liked and wants to be popular. So maybe if you did that, he could get him to do what you want, because that's really what he wants. He's an egomaniac, as most people that run for president are.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way. Do you think there's a strong sentiment? Well, that's probably not the right question, because I think the sentiment does exist, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on it, where it sort of vilifies someone who wants to grow, who wants to build, who has goals, who wants to build a better future, and is sort of an animosity towards that person.
Sure, yeah. It's a bad reward system. It's like doing the opposite. Just because you have a problem doesn't mean that people that strive and want to overcome that problem somehow evil. We are. I mean, this is what I'm saying about the negative lessons coming from all of this. Is that you can be angry about political justice or systemic racism, whatever you want to call it, whether you diagnosed the problem or not, it doesn't matter. But the bottom is, if you can't, how are you going to build something going forward and look, cameras will change. We have to accept that. I think the police is coming to the realization now. But it's put the consequences of our laws that our mayors, our elected officials have supported, our sheriffs were hired to do. It's put the consequences right in front of us in our living room. We can no longer deny it and say, oh, well, the street's safe, we're fine. Okay? We have to come to the Jesus moment and say, is this really okay? I have a problem with this.
Yes.
But is it really the police officer's fault?
Well, see, that's the trick, though, because when this stuff happens, which is happening by design, these officers are they're doing their job.
Yeah, the guy, these instances are different. George Floyd, that guy was not doing his job.
Right, yeah,
okay?
yeah.
He put his neck, right?
Yep.
But yeah.
I totally agree.
But listen, you talk to cops, I talk to cops all the time, okay? You get people irate at them the minute they pull them over. There's a lot of hostility towards cops that we're breeding, and that has consequences.
Yes, exactly. However, when something goes wrong, and George Floyd is going to be a bad example because that was clearly insane, wrong. The attention, though, is what you're saying. The attention is at the level of the police. What do we got to do to get that attention going uphill to the people in charge that are making this? That are having these cops have too many interactions to begin with.
That's what leaders do. Somebody that picks up on that and is not interested in playing Republican against Democrats or the same old policies will come out and articulate this, and people will jump on board. That's what leadership is, But we're not going to get it from the people that have been doing the same thing over and over again, because even if they're smart enough to do it, their instinct is just to do it the old-fashioned way, old-fashioned politics.
Right.
I'm good. He's bad. We're going to divide up the country.
Yeah.
It's up to us to reject that.
Yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we do have power in this. People have the power in this country.
Yeah.
People can only do bad things so long. I mean, heck, Hillary Clinton how powerful is Hillary Clinton? She even got caught with her server.
Yeah.
So anybody in this country can go down.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Where do you see the hope with all of this that's going on right now in America?
I think it's up to us to talk about it openly, and these politicians would have to respond.
Yeah.
We need to talk about, we want to look at this intelligently, and we don't want your stupid generalizations about, whether you like Black Lives Matter slogan or you don't like it. I don't care. I want to look at the problem and the solution. They get off easy when you offend them with a slogan or a flag, or whether you kneel or not, or whether you're both sides. They get off easy when you let them get offended.
Yeah.
Because then they mail it in.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can't get offended. We need to demand that, hey, we can do better. And it's not just the cop. We can have a better. That's easy. It's changing the rules that they play by. That's it.
Right.
That's not really that big a deal. It's a red herring. That's a product of the cameras. But there's more to that. When you're watching that go down and the anger of the people over that, okay, their circumstance in life is causing them to be angry because they don't see the hope to come out of their situation.
Yes.
We got to give people hope.
Yep.
Even if half the people don't make it, okay, as long as they die trying, they will die happy. Okay, but what we have right now is a no hope.
Yes,
that's the critical part.
Because
and if your skin is black and you're male, well, that's just pound more. The odds just quadruple. As long as you're born in the wrong. I mean, obviously there are very successful black families that raise kids that can write their ticket to do anything. But I'm talking about the kids that are in these cities where there's no hope, whatever. There's no good modeling around them, or whatever. Of course, you're going to be angry.
Yes. Yeah. Totally.
You're justified.
Agree. Yeah.
You're totally justified.
Yep.
But the white guilt about it should be moved to be productive, not just be, let's label everything racist and this will all go away. Nothing will go away.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. We're not hearing that so much these days.
Well, right now we're still in the stage. You go kind of like any kind of traumatic event, you go through stages of remorse or shock is probably shock, remorse, whatever you want to call it. And right now we're in the initial stages. And unfortunately, the media is not very good at bringing the most of the media. What I mean by media, I'm primarily referring to the big boxes on the television screen.
Right.
They basically take sides and just feed.
Oh my goodness.
Feed prejudices.
Yeah. Where do you get your news?
I didn't have Fox or CNN until all this started. Then I just got tempted and had subscribed on Hulu just because they were covering the minute by minute.
Oh yeah,
so that was a kind of a new thing.
So you go Fox and CNN.
That's just recent. I didn't have that on my TV. But primarily I like to read my news.
Yeah, me too.
And I like to get it from people that tell different sides of the story, even if it's a story side that I don't agree with. I think that I did most of my learning growing up with this stupid, crazy idea. I don't know where I got it from, but I used to read books that I thought I disagreed with, but I would read the book. And I learned that from one of my college professors that she would pick a debate topic, but she would pick which side you had to argue. You couldn't pick the side.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
And so it taught you to really, you don't understand an argument till you can make an argument for it and against it.
Yes.
And it teaches you discipline and analytical thought. And that's kind of what I learned from life and it came, I think, from the frustration of coming from such a chaotic situation and upbringing, is that you kind of like gravitate towards what can explain all of this. So you're constantly sucking up knowledge, thinking that you can explain it all somehow. And some of it you learn, makes you wise, makes you a bit more perspective, and it definitely overcomes hate. My first reaction coming out of the Middle East was that I hated those people. And the hate was always a problem because it wasn't consistent with my upbringing to hate somebody. So I was like, how do I hate a group but not hate the individuals in that group? Trying to make these fine lines, and then I there was no satisfactory answer to it. So I decided that maybe there's more to this. Why does it happen? And that's where my fascination with macroeconomics and finance came in, is that you can explain so much of human behavior from economics and finance, because that's the truth. You can't solve it just by economics and finance sometimes. You got to understand it. You got to understand that the people's feelings are real. They're not like a formula. But a lot of the problems we suffer from are explainable, and they've happened throughout history. I've read some stories about how people that came from Lebanon in the early days of the 1800s to North Carolina, they were like the bottom of the social ladder. They were like, that's been happening. Irish were slaves at one time. So my point in this is that you got to understand, why is this happening? How to understand how people get out of it.
Yeah.
And so there's always another side to something. You can't rationalize things with thought. You can't just what is it? Paralysis through analysis.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
You gotta figure out. We have failed to improve the economic opportunity to a lot of people, and they are telling us, and we need to listen.
Yes. When you say you totally agree, and I appreciate your thoughts on that, by the way, very much. When you say you read your news, are you getting multiple newspapers?
Yeah.
Or are you reading it online?
Yeah. So my page, I got Barron's Financial. I like a lot of British stuff too. It's good.
Okay.
We got Barron's, Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, and then on that's pretty much it on the apps that I subscribe to. And then you go on Twitter, I follow a ton of news sources, and then I read topical books that from people that have an interesting perspective.
Okay, so you're reading. Are you reading the news on your phone primarily through these apps?
Yeah, and YouTube and apps. Yeah, it's all fun.
Yeah.
I do much better reading something than having. I think unless somebody has a really interesting interview with a guy that has a lot to say, I have no desire to listen to talking heads.
Oh no!
It's like,
I totally agree. Yeah.
But if you get somebody that's really knowledgeable about the subject and is rational, or isn't just trying to make political points and jabs at other people. But what is that? What is that?
Rare.
1% of television?
Yeah, it's very. Right? Yeah, it's probably 1%.
So it's not being a waste of time. But, but I did kind of want to see the riots, like, as they're covering, see what are they saying? What is CNN saying? What's Fox saying? What's the take?
Yeah.
So I bit the bullet and got it, like Hulu TV, whatever.
Yeah.
And it lost interest in about 5 days.
Yeah, I did a little bit of that too over COVID, and then again I tried a little bit to watch some of that during the riots, and man, some of these anchors, they had veins popping out their neck, basically screaming about, their thoughts on what was going on. And then there was the whole defunding the police thing. And of course you had people that didn't really understand what we were talking about and just thinking, well, does this mean we're going to have no more police? And I'm like, they were just like angry and yelling, and I was like, they don't even know what they're talking about. And I was just done. I like to get the actual newspaper at the end of the driveway.
Oh, you do?
Bring it into the office, read it. I just like that. I don't like reading stuff on my phone or the computer. I just never could make that switch.
The reason for the phone thing is like, to get the Financial Times in Nashville, you get it like 2 days late.
Right.
I mean, just the distribution is like,
Of course. Yep.
So it's just right there. And some of the stuff, when you follow these news venues on Twitter, you kind of, it's always right there at your fingerprints.
Right.
A synopsis of what all the stories are.
Yes,
what
totally.
They're saying,
Well, yeah. When with your role, you got to stay up to speed quite a bit more than I think I would need to, which I do want to make sure we talk about.
Okay.
You're the chief investment officer of one of the best performing pension funds in America.
Yeah,
is that fair to say?
Wood?
This is where you can knock on wood. Yeah, but you're not doing great right now. You've been doing good for years.
Right.
What is your role and what are you doing that's so successful?
So, to get into the actual doing of it is a little bit complicated, but pension plans have a very long-term horizon, but it's been misunderstood by many, including people that run pension plans in the past, is that eventually the tail starts to wag the dog. And what I mean by that is, if you have a $5 billion pension plan, and the payroll that supports that, the covered payroll is, let's say, $700 million. A 10% decline in the pension plan is like 3/4 of your payroll, 80% of your payroll. What that means is that you can't. Eventually, the pot of gold is so big that you can't afford any losses in it.
Interesting.
Because you have to fund that on an ongoing basis every year. So we're supposed to make, let's say, roughly a couple $100 million a year, over $200 million a year. But a 10% correction in the market would put us in the whole $300 million a year. So that year, I would need $500 million. Well, how many years like that can I go? Not many.
Right. Yep.
So we devised a plan by working with my committee that we told them, hey, do you want to do this some other way? And we started going down that road gradually to structure a process that has a lot less volatility and very aware of risk and can go risk on, risk off very quickly, and as well as a lot of investments that pay a current coupon. We love to collect those coupons, the payments, because that keeps us paying our pensions. So in the process, we've called it something. We've created something that has little volatility. And what happens is every so often we have a big correction. Every time there's a big correction, our peers lose 13, 14%. We lose 5%. Market comes back. We give back half the difference, but we're still ahead. So do that a few times, and then you're way up there in the number one position. But we never really designed the plan to be that. We were designing a plan that could be sustainable.
Interesting.
And now in hindsight, if I had done all of this and the investments didn't work, then all for naught, right?
Yeah.
Well, it would be wrong.
Yeah.
So the reason I'm right is because those individual investments also worked. So there's the design part, the philosophy, the approach, the risk management, but then every piece that you put in has to work and produce the results. Otherwise, you end up in the same situation. You lost money instead of made money.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense. So walk us through what a pension fund is, who all contributes to it in the city in Nashville. Kind of walk us through that.
All right. So I wasn't expecting this, but as a full disclosure, I'm here as my own person, so I can talk about my job. It's fair, but I'm not talking on behalf of any government or any entity.
Yeah. I'm
simply talking from what I do for a living, which I think I have a right to do. But rights in America has become fungible. So what I do is, City of Nashville has a $3 billion pension plan. It was about 1.2 when I joined in 2003. And today it's 3.3. We pay out money every year, net of the contribution. And that covers, what a pension means is it covers a paycheck for people after they retire. Instead of having to amass $3 million or $2 million in a 401k for themselves to survive in retirement, they can share that risk with other pensioners, and then they don't need as much money because of the life expectancy of human beings is not infinite, it's finite. So what happens is we give them a check in retirement, but in order to do that, we have to invest that money and get a rate of return on that money because we give them an inflation adjustment as well. Because if I give you a check and it never goes up, its value declines over time, especially if we have a lot of inflation. So we have to have some inflation component of it. And actually, that's the biggest challenge with pension plans.
Is it really?
66% of our liabilities are in the inflation in the future.
66% of your liabilities
is inflation. 33% is actually what that benefit somebody earned. But when they retire, there's inflation every year, 1%, 2%, 2.5%. So 66% of the liability that we book is actually inflation in the future. So we have to grow to beat
so much more than I would have thought.
Yeah. And people are usually surprised by that.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that.
So if that's the case, then we need to have velocity of money, meaning money is being lent and coming back and relent and coming back, and hopefully with a very low loss rate, because you always have losses when you lend money, and you also have to control your volatility on your investments. We have ways of doing that as well. And then we have a lot of investments that are very growth oriented in venture capital that have, quite frankly, been the highest performing, the best performing assets. The COVID has actually been good to a lot of those investments because a lot of them offer technological solutions to old problems. Even simple ones like Peloton did really well. You know, sales were up 66% in March, I believe.
Wow.
So
do you own some Peloton?
The pension plan does.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Is Peloton? That's a private company.
It's private,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you own some of Peloton, the pension owns some of Peloton. That is through private equity?
Yes. Through venture capital, yep.
Through venture, okay.
Yeah.
So you have
Which is private equity, you're correct.
Sure.
It's just a more specific.
Okay. Venture capital would be like a subset of private equity. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. So you have the city of Nashville, the government of Metropolitan Nashville. You've got police, firefighters, who else? Government employees.
So it's everybody, okay, except for certified teachers in the school systems. They're on the state plan.
Okay.
So everybody else.
And if you work for the city of Nashville, say this is a firefighter as an example, and you're going to work for a certain number of years, you're going to retire, and you're going to keep receiving a paycheck after you retire. That gets paid out of the pension fund. Your job basically is to make sure that the money's there at the very least, and preferably have lots more money be available.
So we assume when we make the contribution, we assume that we're going to make about 7.25% on the money. So we have to make money in order to satisfy that liability.
When you make the contribution,
remember that inflation I told you
right.
about? It would be a huge contribution that we couldn't afford if we didn't make a return on that money.
Absolutely.
So we pay for that inflation. That 66% of his benefit is inflation, and 33% is actually the dollar amount they actually calculated on the day he retired. We have to invest to keep up with that payment. And
I missed what you were saying about the 7% or 7.5%. Are you saying you have to actually have a 7 or 7.5% return just to keep up with inflation?
No, we do not. No, inflation is only about 2-3% as calculated. We don't contribute. We assume a return on our money, right? So therefore, we contribute less, thinking we can make money, and then we'll satisfy some of that liability through the investment return.
Gotcha.
And when you're saying 7% over a long period of time, that means most of your benefits are paid through earnings, not from the contribution.
Got it.
Let me state that a different way. In the early 80s, this pension plan was less than $100 million.
Total under management.
Total.
$100 million early 80s.
Since the early 80s, okay, all that growth is from that $100 million that grew because we started paying out. So in other words, net of the so they give me a contribution based on the calculated salary that they're paying out, and then we have to pay out. The payouts have exceeded the contribution since the 80s. So therefore, everything we have today, $3 billion, is from that $100 million, plus some additional money that we already paid out.
Wow. That shows the power of proper investment.
So that's why, like somebody somebody that's a millionaire in 1980, they're doing pretty well right now.
Yeah, if they were shrewd, if they were wise with it. Is it public information about what your annual income is from contributions into your fund?
Yeah, it's all.
How much is that?
So net, it's negative. We pay out more than we take in.
Okay.
So the city pays roughly around $170 million in contributions. Sorry. We pay out around 170, 180, and the contributions are about 100 of that.
Wow. So if it wasn't for decent investing, we'd been short a long time ago, but currently we'd be short about 80 million a year. You said you're paying out 180 and receiving 100 million?
Yeah, but you would also not, without the returns, you wouldn't have the $3 billion to be making interest on, so you'd be even shorter than that. So if you were paying as you go, you're about right. You would be paying about 190 million a year out of the budget instead of 100. So you're right about that. But you'd have this massive storm coming in the future that right now you have set aside $3.3 billion to offset.
Yes. Who else? Who are you paying attention to? What other fund managers are you paying attention to, or investment officers, fund investment officers around the country that are doing remarkably well that you're watching?
Yeah. So I have some friends in the space, and I watch what all the pensions do. We have seen a trend of people going in our direction, actually. I didn't invent this. I would never experiment with people's livelihood. Somebody was doing elements of this somewhere when I adopted it. My lending platform, what we do on what we call fixed income alternatives, was done by a couple of large states, primarily Virginia. So I did not know any of the people. And I just studied what they did, looked at the results, and talked to the investors they were invested with. I have some friends on the West Coast that are really good CIOs, so we trade notes and talk, And I have I follow everybody. I follow what CalPERS right now is making. CalPERS is one of the second largest pension in the United States, I believe, if not the first. It's California. I follow what they do, see what direction they're going, how they're doing it, how the committee approves it, does not, what they're saying about it, because we have to deal with people at the end of the day that have to approve what we do. We have to know how to explain it to them when they may not be investment experts. And then we have to so convince them of it that when trials and tribulations come, we have to stay the course.
Right.
And that's not easy.
I was going to say, I imagine that's difficult at times.
Right. So you have to have conviction around it and why you're doing it to begin with.
Yep.
And we never did any of this to be in the top 1% in the country over at Louis Vuitton. Never would I do that. I wouldn't want to work for somebody that wanted me to design that. This is just a function of things working out a little better than anticipated. What we wanted to do is figure out we wanted to not lose as much when things are really bad, and we to be more sustainable, even if that came at a slight price of not making as much when things are really good, to be more sustainable. So that's the structure on the strategic side. Now, when we interpreted that to investments, we did some really good investments that fall into that strategic plan that ended up giving us much better results than we expected.
Okay.
But I would not want to. Beating the competition is not a good way to invest money.
Right.
It can be a disastrous way to invest money.
Yes, but to be clear, the pension fund that you are chief investment officer for is performing extremely well. Let's just be honest about that. We can say that, right?
It's doing well.
And it is top 1% of all pension funds in America?
That's what the charts show. Yeah.
Congratulations.
We have our numbers on their it's public knowledge. I'm not talking about any of it's private.
Yeah.
It's on our website. People can go look at it. We use a consultant, third party, that gives us the numbers and comparisons to peers.
Okay.
we typically, so I can tell you right now, the quarter's not over yet, so I don't have any special knowledge of information. But at the end of this quarter, on June 30, we will probably be in the bottom 50, 60, 70% in the country for that one quarter. Mm-hmm. But for the trailing year, we will still be in the top 3-4%.
I see. Yeah, wonderful.
That's a function of the fact that this quarter the market just came back so strong, and we don't have as many assets in those things that came back so strong.
Makes sense.
So that caused us to lose less when they lost a lot, and we'll make a little less because we didn't have it to begin with.
Sure.
So we never lost it, we'll not make it.
Yes.
But overall, when you do that over and over again, and you have a lot of investments underneath that are collecting coupons, and you have ways of going risk off when things are really unpredictable, then you can keep a lot of money. And and when you keep it, you don't lose it. You don't have to make it. You never lost it to begin with.
How many people roughly are in your office there that are managing the investments?
So involved with the pension plan, it's just two of us.
Okay.
But we have an outsourced model too. We use a consultant. We've used, this is the third consultant we've had since 2003. So they do a lot of the research that we need them to do on individual investments, so then I can review them.
Gotcha. The consultants do.
The consultants do.
Okay.
They also do. They're sort of like a staff in a way.
Sure.
But then they also bring somebody else that the committee can talk to besides me, since so much is at stake. And most large pools of money don't have one person running them. Usually, you have some checks and balances of some sorts.
What is? I was going to ask how far into kind of the everyday or the details of the investments you get. It sounds like you're obviously okaying every single one, and you probably have pretty intimate knowledge about every single one the way it sounds. But first, they're being vetted by the consultants, and the information comes to you before you make an investment. Are you always getting face to face with those people? Or are you just looking at the numbers? You know the company or the potential investment, and making a decision?
No, we always meet them.
Okay.
I don't necessarily always do a site visit, but the consultant will.
I see.
But generally, what I'm dealing with is companies that are, dealing with 50 other pension plans. So these are not fly-by-night companies.
Right.
So even in the venture space where the funds are really small, we are accessing some of the top venture capitalists in the country, and our numbers prove that. Now those guys hardly ever come to Nashville. And I go to conferences to see them and so on and so forth, because they got a line of people wanting to give them money. They couldn't care less.
The venture capital guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
If they're good, they got a lot of people wanting to give them money.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah. So what does your everyday look like? Looking at a bunch of numbers, vetting companies, what?
So it varies a little bit, but we do other things in the office. So sometimes my morning starts with just reviewing the markets and the cash position of the city, if there's anything to be done in that respect. That doesn't take a lot of time unless there is something to be done, and then I got to communicate with people, see what kind of pricing we can get, whatever. So that's on the cash side of the city. But then the performance of the plan is run every night. So when I wake up in the morning, I can pull it up, so I can tell daily what we're doing. And I always review it on a periodic basis, maybe right now daily because the market where we are, but typically it's not as frequently, but it's definitely weekly, because sometimes there's accounting errors and they can only be caught or understood when you've been kind of keeping up with it.
Interesting.
Otherwise, you have to do a lot of forensics to figure out what happened. And so that's that. And then I have a ton of calls every week, usually, to get updates or review investments. Sometimes it can be 2-3 a day. Sometimes it can be 1 a week. So that's that. And then there's part of it of planning long term. So we have a committee meeting coming up every 3 months. Unless we call a special one, we have one every 3 months. So as you get closer, you're always preparing for that. But way before that, you got to kind of tell the consultant, what is it that you're looking at doing in the first quarter? What is it you're doing? Like right now, they know exactly what we're going to do at the August meeting. Okay, but we've been talking about what we're going to do the 2 quarters after that, because they got to tell their people to put these things on their agenda, to meet with those managers, vet them out, do whatever. So I'm always working on about 3 quarters, but the immediate quarter is gets the most attention as you're within a month or a month and a half from it to make a decision. Is this an investment really go or no go?
Yes.
Like, is this, so that's typically what we do.
Yeah.
The keeping up with the investments is not just because I need to keep up with investments, but it is a intelligence gathering operation. So you want to know how the world's operating, what these guys are doing. You got to be on the phone with people that are trading those markets, seeing the pricing, seeing who's can explain to you why the pricing is moving the way it is. What happened? Somebody's not buying, somebody's buying. So all these things have consequences to how things happen in the future. So when we get portfolio updates, we're getting updates on what their peers are doing, what the competition is doing, how they're responding. So this is part of the intelligence gathering that has sometimes implications how you position a portfolio going forward. And that's a constant situation.
Yep.
And then there's the business aspect of it. You got to negotiate contracts with these people. You got to find people that are competent, that are best in the business, that they're not going to do something stupid that will make you look like an idiot, and yet still want to get a good fee from them. How do you get around that? Can you make a big commitment? Will they compromise? So there's very much that piece,
Yeah.
And people will do whatever we want because we have $3.3 billion, but those people may not be the people we want.
Right.
So the people we want may not need us.
Yep.
So you gotta have people that also want to communicate back too, and not just be through a salesperson or just be selling you something.
Right.
The good partners in this industry understand what I'm doing and are providing me add value to do my job. Okay, and the minute that I notice that the add value is bias because they're trying to get me to do what they want me to do, then we move on to the next guy.
I see.
You got to be. It's very much a judgment call on. Hey, they're just saying that because they want this.
I see. Interesting. We already talked a little bit the other day at CrossFit about the show Billions. And essentially, with your role, if anyone's seen the TV show Billions,
Axl Rose.
Axl Rose, and sometimes Taylor Mason will go and pitch a pension fund manager, right? And I think in the show they had one who was managing the pension fund for, I want to say the NYPD maybe, or maybe it was the fire department. I feel like it was not the whole city though. And so they're pitching them, and you can tell these pension fund managers, I mean, they're really after that money. You would be the equivalent of that, right? It'd be as if they'd be coming to pitch you to try to get you to give them some of your money, and then they're going to give you a return, correct?
Yeah.
That's how you would fit into that show. And you've seen a little bit of that show, and you said some of the personalities or the egos are actually correct.
I think some of the personalities on the hedge fund side, we have a lot of egos in our industry. Tell you a quick little story. I heard this may be just a rumor, but I heard somebody tell a story that somebody asked Bill Clinton about the House of Cards, and he said, "That's really not far from reality." And I was like, "Oh my God!"
The Netflix show, or the TV show, House of Cards. Yeah.
Because people are being murdered and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I could tell you, thankfully, thank God, I can tell you that as far as like the shenanigans that went on in that show, where the people doling out the money were corrupt and all, the people in my shoes and all, I can tell you for sure that is not the case.
Oh, okay. All the corruption and everything?
Corruption.
Okay.
I think the egos, though, definitely, I tell people sometimes that managers in our business confuse their IQ with their W-2. So a guy starts out with a very reasonable understanding of his IQ. But then after he makes a few $1 million, He really does think his IQ grew proportionally.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah.
So there's a ton of.
It's a human reaction.
Yeah, ton of. The W-2 starts being confused for the.
I can see that. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's a lot of that. You know, we got a lot of money at stake in some of them. I mean, we're talking billions and billions. You know, they personally possess. So. These are some really rich people.
Yeah.
We try to do business with people that are well aligned with us, no matter how big their ego is. But we got to make sure that the checks and balances are in place, because we don't have like chaotic, industry that being. If the chief operating officer can be bullied by people in the firm, then you just start questioning even the pricing and so on. So and. I learned a long time ago, just from life, that the more if you know there's some snakes in a hole, right, and you get away with sticking your hand in there once, and you get it out and it's whole, don't do it again.
Yeah.
Right. So what I mean by that is, if you know that there's potholes everywhere, you have to select carefully. But also, once you have people that you have confidence in, you don't have to stick your hand in the hole again and try your luck. So we're very selective. We do business over and over again with people that perform, and fortunately, because people perform and we give them more money, people that are totally fine, but they just don't perform as well, we don't have money for them. It's just a function of giving somebody else more money. So I have less reason to go out, find somebody new to do something and try this again. And
that makes sense.
So I have relationships that have been in place ever since I got to the city.
Wow.
So we don't just, now, there are changes in the portfolio that occur over time because of the size that enable us to do things we couldn't do before, that can control costs and give us a better risk-adjusted return, that we may have to find people that can do it now that we didn't in the past. So there has to be a compelling reason why we're doing something like that.
Yeah.
When you already have somebody that's already doing it. Hopefully you can tempt the guy that has been already doing it, that's very successful at it, to do what you need to have done.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
If you had a friend come up to you and ask your advice on how to invest $100,000, what would be some of your thoughts or your advice right now in this market?
So it would really depend on how long a horizon that is, of course. So I'm assuming when you say invest, that it says long-term money. So I have to know where the money came from, not necessarily like personal, but like, for example, did he just take it out of the market? Because if he just took it out of the market, that means he made some money on it. So if the market's overpriced right now, I'd look at it differently because he already made some of that overpricing. But if he just got a settlement from an insurance company because he can no longer work again because he damaged his right arm and he needs to go back to school, and this is like the only thing left, then we got to look at that money differently. So the purpose of the money matters a lot.
Yeah.
But, generally speaking, if you have a long-term horizon, and that's, to me, over 7 years, equity index funds do very well. And the S&P 500, U.S.-centric equity index funds, probably a good place to start. There's always a risk that the day you got in was too high. So if the guy does not want to wake up one day and see that his 100 became 70,000, then I got to diversify that portfolio to make sure that a 40% market correction doesn't make him see 70,000. So you backward calculate what you should do based on the outcomes you want or don't want, and that's really what we do.
But you would lean more towards market as opposed to something like real estate. Because we did say a very average person here, so.
Yeah, I think so. First of all, real estate can be done while people have a lot of money. But generally speaking, investment real estate, you have concentration of risk around one market, one asset. You have to be careful. You asked who I listen to, Howard Marks is one of my favorite investors, and the reason he's my favorite investor is because, his firm has done well, but really he's a professor, he's a teacher, and he tells great stories. And, you got to understand human behavior and how fallible we are. And that's a term that emotional intelligence and investing. You have to understand how people behave. So just because something worked for the last 10 years or 15 years, people will tend to dive right in. But that's really exactly the time when maybe you shouldn't.
Right.
So your understanding of the asset class has to take into consideration your background, how well you understand it. Can you understand what caused this? Was it repeatable? And is $100,000 enough to? Now, if you tell me that some guy is really handy and can do just about any project in a house, okay, and wants to use some of that money to take on a house and flip it, he is adding value way beyond that 100,000. Right. So as long as the market holds up and he buys smartly, he has a special. That's different than investing. Most investing, what we're doing is we're very passive investors. We put it and we walk away.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that a real estate company can do that a company in the S&P can't do. There is real estate in the S&P. So now, our bias in real estate right now is not for equity and core real estate. It's for lending because we're getting a far higher return, we think. We may be wrong. We're getting a far higher return in the coupon we're collecting than we think the real estate investors will get from the equity on their return, especially when you adjust it for risk.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
But now, this is not apples or oranges. One is core real estate, and the other one is lending on real estate that may not be core. So there is a difference in risk, but we think the upside more than justifies that. So there's a lot to this to investing, and one of the problems that I come across all the time is that people try to oversimplify it, and I get people come up to me, should I invest in MLPs? They're down 60%. They're down 30%. And they don't understand MLPs. There's a reason why they're down. I'm not just picking on one asset, but that happens all the time. People just lack the knowledge. But there is this human nature that, hey, this guy told me that everything's overpriced, but this one thing is down 30%. Is this where I should be putting my money? Well, maybe not. You got to understand it. And if you don't understand it, then you won't. Just understanding it doesn't mean you're right or you will be right. Right?
Yep.
But at least you will have some conviction around it. And if you understood it and it went the wrong way, you would then understand what is it that you assumed that didn't turn out right. So is it just haphazard, or did you not understand it, or did something change?
Yes.
So you have a basis for making a decision where people, and the nice thing about things like S&P 500 is that you don't have to understand every company in the S&P and whatever. They self-adjust based on prices going up and down. You'll own a lot of companies that represent growth assets. Now, it gets overpriced just like any other asset. But so there's ways to mitigate that by putting in your money gradually over time, or not putting all of your money in equities and diversifying with fixed income. Traditional fixed income, investment grade fixed income is very challenging right now because you're making less than 2%.
Wow.
So how are people supposed to, so you're going to have more and more people taking risk just by virtue of the fact that the Fed has managed the rates so low that, not just the Fed, the Fed doesn't manage the long rate. It's basically people's perception of the future. And that's actually what the bond market is telling us is negative, not positive. The fact that the 10 years less than 1 is not good news. It means the market is predicting less growth, less inflation, so that's not good.
I see.
On the other side of that, if the overpriced S&P is because there's no other guy in town. There's no game in town for liquid assets. So I try to be careful giving people advice because I walk away and things change. And then it happened one time with a friend. Actually, he lived in California. And he called me and said, should I do this? I said, I think it's a great idea, but I would wait. He says, why? I said, because I really think there's a correction in the technology companies. And I didn't wasn't forecasting what happened in 2000 in the market, but I knew these things were overpriced. But he went ahead and did it anyway.
Okay.
Right? So then he calls me back years later. I said, well, I told you, and then he's still holding on to it. I'm like, so I'm like, man, if I don't know what, you're not my client.
Right.
I can't tell you to get, I don't know what you're doing. You're interpreting what I said. And, we change our mind about investments all the time.
Sure, I believe that.
And like the way we invest in the S&P 500, I could have 300 million in the S&P today, and I could have 200 tomorrow. That's something a little harder for you to do because you have execution costs and things like that. But the way we do it is very much, we're not necessarily targeting at a dollar value in the S&P. We're actually targeting at a certain level of risk for our overall portfolio.
Interesting.
So we sometimes take advantage of overpriced markets where investors trading with commissions or can't do it as effectively. So, and even if they did do it, the cost over time would eat up the benefit. Yeah. So it is a little bit different, but so the short answer though is I would just diversify portfolio. Yep. And I would it's a very mathematical problem that an advisor could help them with. Where hey, if you only want to see worst case scenario 15%, then we can only have X in the market, and we don't. If you want to. Dollar cost average that in over a period of time, and that's why it matters a lot what you're going to use the money for, where did it come from. Yep. So you should think of it as goal oriented instead of there is no perfect way to invest your money at any time. That's not a concept that actually exists.
That's right.
Model portfolio theory would tell you there is, but it's just a theory.
I see. Interesting. Well, Lincoln's got to get to a baseball game.
All right. Did I exceed Evan's time?
I don't know. I don't know how long Evan's time was. I don't know. We'll have to check later.
Well, let me tell you, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
I enjoy working out with you, by the way.
Oh, likewise. Yeah, likewise. It's been a real pleasure seeing you. Every day you're in there.
Yeah. And, I try. So last week I made it 3 times. I had to lay back. I kind of tweaked my knee a little bit, and I knew if I did more, I would injure myself. So it wasn't quite an injury. It was just kind of like, what did I do? Yeah. And you know what I did? I took on box jumping with my lifters on, and it just transferred all that energy into my knees.
And you felt it?
Knees. Yeah, I just kind of said, nope, that doesn't feel good. And by then it was too late to change shoes. I was kind of feeling it.
A week and a half ago, I really tweaked my lower back doing deadlifts, which is so dumb because I feel like I generally care a lot about form. And I was even keeping it light, but man, it got sore for like a week there. It's getting better now, but last week was brutal programming, man. Old Evan, man, he had a rough week last week. Yeah. By the end of the week, dude, I was in a rough shape, but I went to a sauna on Saturday. I think I told you, but I felt a lot better, actually. Yeah. It really feels
I think what I'm noticing in the gym is a lot of us are suffering from being out of the gym for 6 weeks. So we're, even though it's been over a month, we're not at the same place we were when we left.
Yeah, agreed. So, any final thoughts or words of advice you want to leave with our listeners?
I think we laid it all down, didn't we?
Yeah,
we not talk about it. We solved all the world's problems. I think that I do actually. I feel like we should give people the benefit of the doubt. Not question their intentions or automatically assume negative intentions, or treat them nice. And I think most people are actually deserving of it, and so makes you happier. You might learn something.
Totally agree. I love that. I feel the exact same way. Well, Lincoln, I think this is our last podcast conversation. We're going to take July off.
Oh,
so take a little time. We've been hitting this pretty hard the last few months, so we don't have any lined up for July, and we'll see what happens thereafter. So I don't think we could have picked a much better guest for the last one, at least for this little season.
I'm flattered. I don't know about that.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for being on, Fadi. Really appreciate it. We'll see you tomorrow at the gym, right?
Thank you. Yep. Take care. All right.